We've had a lot of great discussion this morning about sustainability and what it is, what it isn't, and a lot of people have given some tremendous thought to where do we go from here. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that consumer. They're on a journey. I only hope I have as much energy as Frank gave to the presentation. I probably won't, and all of our speakers did such a great job. But the most important thing I think you're going to hear in this piece of the conversation today is we're beginning to sync up. If you'll notice, there have been a lot of echoes of similar thoughts, similar ideas, facts and stats and conversations that we're having, and I actually take that as affirmation. Affirmation that we're on the right path, we're on the right journey, we're actually heading in the same place together. We've got this idea. The group that gathered here today is nothing short of astounding. How amazing that you all took time out of your businesses to be here today. It's always a very proud moment when you can gather this many wonderful dairy leaders in one room because you're hardworking people and this is not something you take lightly. So I appreciate the fact that you're here. Very quickly, again, I'm Linda Atherton, I'm with Ketchum, and the only reason I'm here is to help you hear just a little bit more about the consumer today. The consumer is a little bit of a conundrum, we know, and if we're going to be on this wonderful path of sustainability, we're going to have to move even more aggressively to get inside their head, to understand them, to be part of their world, and to bring what we know, the great information and the great work we're doing closer to what they're looking for. It's really just that simple. So it's about getting us from where we are today to an even more relevant place in their hearts and their minds. The great news is you've heard the stories here today already. You are the stewards of the land. Nobody needs to prove that anymore. And in fact, it was echoed this morning in the number of stats and facts when I heard Eric Frywald from Syngenta mention that U.S. farms are greenhouse negative, unlike any other farming regions of the world. It really struck me that that's a piece of information I had never heard before. And having worked in the dairy industry for a very long time, I thought, wow, how did I not know this? So part of this is beginning to coalesce our thoughts and our ideas around how we communicate better and how we reach these consumers better. And Bob was so right this morning. We can't PR our way out of any kind of negativity or conversation. This has to be a concerted effort where we work closely together. And you've already worked so closely together here in California. Look at the amazing things that you have done. The amount of investment you have made has paid off in cost savings, in energy savings. It's bringing you closer together. It's bringing you worldwide recognition. It's bringing you an opportunity to escalate and elevate your industry in ways that you maybe never even thought you could do 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So the foundation is here. You're on the right path. You're on a great path to greater success. The question is, well, where do we go from here? Well, I'd like to say that our brand is very strong. Now, I know the word brand is a little controversial, and that's controversial for some. It's in air quotes only because I'm not referring to the symbol or the seal of California Dairy Milk, although we all love it and it's a wonderful thing. The idea in a consumer's head of a brand is a promise. It's a concept. The concept of all things California Dairy, that is a brand in the consumer's mind. They have an image, an idea, a concept, and it is made up of the collective behaviors of every one of you. It's made up of your collective brands and products and how you behave as an industry. The American consumer sees the food industry as one group of people who all like get in a room and figure it all out. I wish we did. The truth is we don't. And they don't know that there's supply chain, value chain. They don't even know there's chains in food. It's the food industry. You're the dairy industry. You are a singular brand to them. And so what your collective behaviors are and say about you relative to sustainability is going to be heard if you do it together, if you do it in a way that it adds up to a point of view, an idea, a thought. So think about where's the next step for our industry? What is the next thing that we could be doing to take our industry forward and closer to the hearts and minds of consumers? I can tell you that today's consumer is more interesting than any consumer I think that's ever been studied. We know there's been a huge transformation in the American psyche and the buying population. And long ago, I did some work that some of you may know about, is about the food evangelist, and how that person has really changed the way we look at food, and has created a movement of thinking about food differently and with more passion and more importance in terms of where food comes from. These are basically just consumers who really, really, really care. They care so much that they want to talk about what's important to them. They care about what they're putting in their bodies, and not just casually, they're investigating. And because they care, they want to know you care too, with the same amount of passion. And I can swear for every one of you, you do, but they just don't know it yet. And I think that's one of the interesting sort of things that we have to accomplish here. We know they've changed our marketplace. They're buying more fresh. They're putting fewer ingredients into their bodies. But they're very much focusing on brands and businesses and organizations and products that do more to make a positive contribution to the community at large and the community at home. And when I say contribution, I don't mean writing a check. It has nothing to do with that. In fact, the old ideas of CSR, social responsibility, where you'd make a financial, contribution to an organization, and that was your social duty for the year, and you could check the box. Those days are gone. These consumers are looking for you to make a real impact and advocate for real change on their behalf. They see you as their advocates, and I think that's a pretty cool place to be. Now, you might see them as confusing and confounding and irritating maybe at times. They want you to advocate for them. So what a great role for you to step into, and you can. A couple of years ago, we did a piece of work trying to figure out what the good life looked like to these people. And we did a Harris poll that was debuted at the Sustainable Brands Conference. And at that moment, we revealed that 71% of those who had been polled said that living the good life today is far, far different from that for them than it was for their parents. And when you think about it, this world that they are living in couldn't be more different than that of their parents. I know my parents can barely relate to the world I live in, and my children, we are equally more in different places in terms of what's important. And what we're learning about what's important to these people, most important, is the fact that they're looking for simplicity, for balance, and real connectivity. And that word connectivity is so critically important. These are not people who casually purchase products and fill the basket and then they're done. They think about what they're eating. They think about what they're buying. They think about the people who actually produce these foods. They're asking questions. They have vehicles to do those question and answers in the form of tablets and mobile devices. This is where the connectivity comes in. This is where the real dynamic of difference comes in this generation. They're connected and they expect to have answers to the questions they're asking. And when they don't, they get a little concerned that somebody might be hiding or not sharing information, which really isn't true. We just might not know how to connect just yet. It's changing the way we do business, and it's changing the way we buy brands and even our relationships with brands. Consumers want us to lean in and listen to them because they know they can change the world, and they already have. They know they have that power. Their voice, when it coalesces, when it comes together and aggregates through social channels, is powerful. And they don't need a membership card, an NGO, an organization to get them excited and get them organized. They do it themselves. They just do it themselves. They want to be loyal to the people who listen. So I think one of the questions I would ask this industry today is, how are we demonstrating collectively as a group, how are we demonstrating that we're listening? How are we demonstrating that we care? One by one, yes, you are, and you do. The question is, how will we do that together? I think that's a really interesting idea for the future. They're judging us every single day. They're judging the products. They're judging what we have done or not done on our farms. They're judging us through the news they're reading, right or wrong news, fake or not fake news. They're judging us. And they're learning more and more about not only what you make, but how you make it. They're actually trying very hard to get educated. You'll hear in consumer focus groups that they're really working hard to try to understand how exactly do they make that. I kind of took that for granted all these years. I never knew there were enzymes in making cheese. They're fascinated with that. What? Enzymes. Of course there is, right? They're not going to back down. They say that food processing is, it's one of their top conversations in a USFRA piece of research. We know that it continues to be one of the most important purchase conversations is processed okay and isn't it? And by the way, they define what processed is or isn't, not us. Process is anything that doesn't look like its original form or function when it came from the earth or from Mother Earth. So, it's pretty difficult to take all the processing out of food. In fact, you don't want that because I think it'd be a pretty sick environment. But the truth is they're concerned. Is it all right? Is it all necessary? Is it all important for me? Is it going to do something good for my family? But the good news is that all the work that you have been doing, you've done so well that trust is definitely growing. We have found through our research, again with USFRA, that trust is most definitely related to how much they are hearing about sustainable practices. Whether it's the consumer who is extremely passionate and cares a lot, who is exceptionally driven by the trust value that comes with sustainable practices, or the general population, everyday consumer, is still very likely to feel a greater sense of trust if they know that you're working to ensure and create some sustainable practices on your farms. And we know that everybody's doing it differently and everyone has different opinions about what that should be. And to that point, every consumer has a different idea of what sustainability should be. It's very personal. So in one family that is riddled with children with allergies, everything that is sustainable to them is about getting those ingredients and elements out of that child's diet and making it so that that child can lead a happy, healthy life unthreatened. That's sustainability to that individual. To someone else, that has absolutely no bearing whatsoever. So we have to be generous in our way of thinking about how it's defined and listen very carefully. Choosing brands today among these individuals is like a quest. It's almost like a game. Used to be that consumers were intensely loyal to individual brands. I'm a Tide buyer, I'm always going to buy Tide, and my mom bought Tide, and it just doesn't happen that way anymore. In fact, consumers are actually moving aggressively to try different brands and products that make new and more unique promises, not necessarily a different benefit, but they're looking for different promises, different ways that this product is going to do something right for me and my family. So there's a lot of switching going on. So we've got to be cognizant of the fact that this is kind of like playing to the wind. It's constantly moving. In 2016, Fortune did a great article called The Fast Food Nation, and this was in April, and they asked what were the top 3 drivers for consumers, particularly millennials, when they were looking for foods. And at that point in time, it was cage-free, no GMOs, and no allergens. Now that was spring of 2016. Fast forward 12 months later, to a USFRA perception study, very similar, and the top 2 drivers were no added hormones and no antibiotic use. And I think what this shows me is sustainability is what the conversation is in the moment and at that moment in time. So the conversation changes, the conversation shifts, news shifts. So we have to look at sustainability in its holistic fashion and be ready to morph and flex into whatever parts of that conversation are meaningful. I talked earlier about the importance of health. Health is the new status symbol. It is the new wealth. And health has a much bigger meaning than I'm healthy and my doctor says so. It's actually health of family, health of bodies, health of community and environment, less hunger in my community, more waste reduction, less pollution. It is a very healthy place and surrounding. And it is the reduction of things that concern me in my life. Specific ag practices, chemicals, pesticides, etc., actually play into I am either healthy or not healthy, depending upon how aggressively I work to get those practices or those elements out of my life. So how are we going to reframe the health story to consumers to let them know that our practices are healthy and that we can be part of a very healthy lifestyle? We can, and you heard about it today. You heard it through sustainable nutrition stories, and we have stats, we have the information. We just need to be able to connect the dots now. Today's wellness consumer, through some of our research, is showing us that they're willing to try and experiment. They're experimenting constantly. So they're willing to be engaged with anyone who's contributing to the environment and doing something good for their community. And they want to hear not only about what you're doing, but they want to actually do it with you. Finding ways to bring them closer to your operations, to your businesses, and get them engaged in your business. It can be done virtually. I'm not talking about walking across your land. You can engage consumers virtually now in very, very creative ways. Engage them in your sustainable practices. They define wellness today as both physical and emotional. Remember we talked, I think John asked the question, is it facts or emotion? It's both, and it's equal. They're equally important. That's a sense of wellness and well-being. That's a sense of health. That's a sense of balance. When either one of those two elements is out of place, where physical attributes are more aggressively communicated or emotional attributes are more aggressively communicated, and it's not in balance, it creates a sort of dissonance, and consumers feel like somebody's exaggerating, something's wrong here. Wellness and well-being and the connectedness to the simple life is about having these things all in balance. And we do know that they're very sensitive to exaggerated benefits. So as proud as we may be about all of the things that we're doing in our industry and beyond, let's be very, very careful to put context around those facts. One of the most important things that hasn't happened in conversations that's caused a lot of problems for us is that facts dangle out in the wind and they have no context to put them into proper perspective. We have the opportunity to create perspective and context around facts and stats and information. That will help to keep the exaggeration, the dissonance down as we move forward in our conversations. You know, they know that they can influence brands, and they know that they have a lot of power as consumers who care, but they're not yet seeing enough brands and businesses who seem to get it, who seem to know what they're looking for. So we know we have more to do on the road ahead. And if they're not finding what they want, and if they're not hearing what they want, unfortunately the assumption is there must be something wrong, and I'm not going to buy, I'm not going to try, I'm not going to eat. I can't take that risk. So it's an interesting way of them editing you out of their lives as well. We're definitely on a new road. The signs are very, very clear. We used to think we were in business for profit. Well, we are. But the truth is, we really are serving at the pleasure of people these days. We really are stewards of consumers. And consumers are telling us where they want us to go. They've mapped the road ahead, a road that we've never been on before. It's a little rocky and a little bumpy, and we're all going to get there. We're going to be fine. And actually, so far, it's all good. We're making great progress. We're getting there. To get inside their heads, we have to do a little more research and figure out what do they need, what do they want. And I think the word of today is never stop listening, never stop asking, never stop researching. Research cannot be a slice of information from a moment in time anymore. It has to be an active practice of listening. I'm going to do something that might be a little fun here. I hope it is. We thought it would be fun to take a snapshot of what are they thinking about right now. So we did a quick omnibus poll, and our objective was to figure out not only what you all think about various different aspects of sustainability and what you think they think, but we were going to compare it to what they said. So let's see what has happened here. We asked the same 3 questions of you as we did of consumers, and you did some predicting of what you thought they would say. First, we asked, how important is sustainability to you? You all said, well, very important. Well, obviously, this group would say that. 72% definitely said very important and somewhat important. Not surprising. It's on your minds. You care. You wouldn't be here. You thought consumers who are asked that question would say 64% or so. They're not going to be quite as ambitious or excited about sustainability as we are. Well, you were very, very close. Among all Americans, 60% said that this is somewhat to very important to them. I did call out California to see if there was any discrepancy there, and only a very slight uptick. So the importance is there. Now that's among all Americans who were sampled. This is projectable statistically. Now look what happens when you zero in on that group of individuals, consumers who intensely care about sustainability and these practices. 78% said it's extremely and very important. It suddenly jumps up exponentially. This is a group of individuals who are not going to be silent about what they care about. They're going to be talking, good or bad, about what matters to them. So they have opinions, and they're going to share their opinions. So let's look now, not just at sustainability, let's look at food. So relative to food, what are sustainable attributes? And if you took the survey, some of you in here did, you'll remember there were 16 attributes that we listed. We said, if any one of these attributes tends to be something you would associate with a sustainable practice or the word sustainability, mark it and put them in order. What we heard from you was the top 3 were safe to consume, environmentally friendly packaging, reduced food waste. This is clearly what's on your mind right now. You think they're going to say organic practices, healthy for the environment, and reduced antibiotic use. Here's what they said. Reduced pesticides and chemicals, safe to consume, healthy for me. You're really, really close. You actually said what they're thinking. You're very, very close. And remember that pesticides and chemicals? This keeps coming up. This is kind of a bubbling theme that I want to keep putting forward. Antibiotics, pesticides, chemicals tend to keep cropping up in this conversation over and over and over again, and I think we can't ignore this. When we asked what is sustainable food, 52% said they would associate the attributes of sustainable food as food that's free from concerns, chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, steroids, blah, blah, blah. These are, they put it in the category of free from. So that's a pretty large group of people. And when it comes to food attributes, food and its attributes to sustainability, you said reduced water usage, safe to consume, and healthy for me are what are most associated between the word food and sustainable practices in food. You thought they would say, they're going to say it's safe to consume, healthy for me, but the absence of GMOs. You're pretty sure that that's still on their minds, and that's what they're going to say. Well, here's what they said. Their top 3 did not mention GMOs, but it was very, very close to what you thought they would say. GMOs, the absence of GMOs fell way, way, way down to the bottom. So as you can see, you have it on your minds. It's really important that we sync up with what's on their minds, what they're really thinking at this moment in time. And what's important to dairy? You said safe to consume, healthy for me, reduced water use, but you thought they would say reduced antibiotics, animal welfare, and healthy for me. Well, here's what they said. Animal welfare, reduced antibiotics, and safe to consume. You're really close, and I love this. This means you're really tuned in to what they're thinking and what's important to them, and that is actually great news because you can't have a conversation if you're not hearing what they're talking about. You've got a great foundation. You've been building and adding value every step of the way, and every improvement, every iteration, every constant movement forward in this journey of sustainability brings not only added value, but added relevance. Leaning into your legacy and giving everyone that vision of you, the dairy industry, the entire dairy industry of California, as a very sustainable brand. You know, the trust in farmers and ranchers is going up and up. We've seen it in the USFRA polls, and it's really great to see. And that's because of the work you're doing, and because you're telling the stories of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you're opening up your information and your lives to them. They're going to be loyal to you when you listen. We've heard that earlier. And we know that when you keep those promises of the things you say you're going to do and then tell them you actually did it, man, that's important to them. So you heard about Patagonia, Cliff Bar, REI. These are all brands that have built themselves around purpose. So I would ask, what is the purpose, your collective purpose, when it comes to sustainability? Is it possible to have one purpose statement? Wouldn't that be interesting? That you could gather around, that you could rally around, that you could deliver on that promise to your consumers. I'm not going to go through this Nielsen work, but there's definite Nielsen work that shows that sustainability can and does sell. It not only increases velocity of purchase, but it also increases dollar sales. This was environmental claims that were made in absence of artificial ingredients and fair trade in the chocolate industry. We've seen it in a number of different categories. We saw it later on even in the dairy industry, that when they see claims that signal that you're interested in working in sustainable ways, then it matters to them, because this is part of what transparency really is, isn't it? Transparency isn't more information, it's access to information. It's cues, it's signals, it's signs, it's invitations, it's opportunities to engage. And those are what those claims and those words on the packages mean to them. So what's on our package? What do we stand for? What are we promising? What story are we telling on the inside and the outside? We know that the plastic issue is really beginning to bubble up and rise. It's a situation that not all of us can control, but we do have an obligation as an industry to look at it together and ask, what else could we do? What more could we do? Is this going to be our next thing that we need to fight for and demonstrate that we care about this environment? I don't know, but I know that this is on consumers' minds right now. It's a journey, and we're on a great path to great successes. Let's not be just milk. Let's be milk and more. Thank you.